jazzy intro song. I like it. How's everyone? Okay, good. Assorted murmurs. I can kind of see a few of you. It's always so different after first service where I can see everyone. My name is Stephen. I am here. I work with the young professionals here. You may be like, well, Stephen, where are all the young professionals? Because if you're looking over here, there are two. Hey, guys. We crashed first service this morning so that they could meet some of us, and it was a lot of fun. It was good to see all of those faces in there, and they really enjoyed seeing all of them there. I also teach at Sinclair Community College. I teach writing. My classes right now are 2.5 hours long, so get comfortable. No, we shouldn't go that long today. So how many of you already this morning have seen something that you disagree with? Heard something you disagree with? Sally's in the back. Well, it wasn't my sermon earlier, was it, Sally? 2.5 hours. Yeah, she knows the joke that's coming up. I just said we were going to go for 2.5 hours, and none of you were like, yeah, I disagree with that. All of you should have said something about that, so I guess I can go for that long. It's hard to go through life, even a day, without finding something that disagrees with you or just rubs you the wrong way. So for some of you, I know that when you go to Kroger and you see 10 items or fewer, now some of you are like, what? What's wrong with that? But the grammar nerds, we know. We know that fewer is for things that you can't count, and you can count items in your cart. Well, most of you can. I've seen some, 25 items trying to sneak in that lane. Not on my watch. Or maybe it's the person that's in the left lane, 675, going 55 miles an hour with their left blinker on. And you don't know if they know where they're going. You don't know where they're going, but you know they're going there slowly. That's something that just rubs you the wrong way. It rankles you. Something's wrong with my mic. That's what's bugging me. I disagree with that this morning. Somewhere, culture shapes us and attunes us to certain beliefs and certain practices. Unless you're a grammar nerd, 10 items or fewer doesn't bother you. Now, everyone's bothered by the driving thing. But trust me, under 16, that gets a lot more irritating when you're the one driving. But there's some other differences that I'm going to have to not move. There's some other differences that may come up, some other disagreements. Maybe this one is big in your family. This one is awful. There, maybe I untake that will. Nope. Nope.
World Wide Web.
Yep. I don't disagree with anything John just did. Maybe this is big in your family. Oh, no, it was a gasp. A gasp. Okay. How many of you are team over with the toilet paper? How many team under? All right, a number of you debilitating tennis elbow socket injuries can't raise your hands. You know what? Over has won absolutely overwhelmingly in both services, so I'm going to have a talk with the janitors. Say over here on out. Or maybe this. Cats. You know who wins this argument? Everybody wins this argument. Because I got to put cute things on the slide. Everybody wins. Or this is another one that is a little lopsided. Oh, we have quite a few people for vanilla. All right, if you want to know if it has good ice cream, you go vanilla. If you're unsure and I just want what I know is good, you go chocolate. All right. Vanilla bean's really good. You get those vanilla bean flavors. But some disagreements aren't small. Some disagreements really, really matter. Like we're about to enter and see this for the next 5 months. That's the only thing you're going to see for 5 months. That's it. Some of you feel very strongly one way or the other. Others of you think we are in the worst game of Would You Rather. And it can just end. Or what about this one? Size. It's telling. I don't know if you can read that fine text. It says science adjusts its view to what's being observed. Faith plugs its ears, closes its eyes, so it doesn't have to see anything it disagrees with. Is that right? We'd say no. But we want to talk about the relationship between things like this as a church because these matter. A lot of the disagreements ultimately don't matter that much. Maybe the toilet paper thing is big in your house. I don't know. Not mine, never has been. I didn't know about that till I was an adult. We want to talk about these because if you believe this, that shapes the way you communicate with people. When you say faith and the world, the culture thinks this is what faith means, is that what you mean with faith? No, that's not what we mean by faith. So we need to know and know ways of communicating, understand the culture, and understand where faith and culture meet because this affects how people view the church. This affects how people view us. And this will affect how we view our own relationship with God and our own faith. So let's start by talking about faith and culture. Of the two, culture is the easy definition. Culture is the beliefs, customs, and knowledge of a group of people. As a church, we have a culture. As a service, we have a culture. As a small, we have a culture. As a family, you have a culture. And so we see this all the time. Much of these beliefs, customs, and knowledges are benign. In a week or so, a little more, we're going to get together with friends and family. We're going to go outside. We're going to cook meat. And we're going to set off small explosives. Because this is America, and that's what you do on the weekends. No, it's the 4th of July. You especially do it on the 4th of July. This could be how you say hello. In Afghanistan, the military would go through special training. Because someone would be driving towards them, and they do this. And that does not mean stop. That is a rude gesture. And to train them to do this instead. A small cultural difference, but learning to communicate to that college that cultural difference is life. I'm not interrupting Bob. Mike's not doing a good job. All right, but some of this is not benign. Some of this is what the Bible calls the world. And when it's the world, it's that which runs contradictory to our beliefs, our customs, our sense of morality, or even comes up with harmful definitions for words that are very different from the way we use that word. So how do we define words like faith? This is how the culture does it. Belief that is not based on proof. Again, we have that closing the eyes, plugging the ears definition of faith. It's not based on proof. It's not based on anything. It's just based on what you want to believe. The dictionary's job is to show how the culture uses the word. And this definition appears alongside definitions like devotion to a religion, belief in God. And so it's easy to see how people equate faith, this definition, with what we talk about in here. Christianity has a different definition of faith. Our definition of faith comes from Hebrews 11. It says, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. We're going to run into how we got from this to the cultural definition of faith, but you can see what we do not see is present in both of them. But we aren't just closing our eyes. We aren't just plugging our ears. What are we doing? Well, we have to talk about the Greek word pistis for a minute. Pistis, throughout the New Testament, is the word that we translate faith. And it means more than faith. Among its definitions, it gets tricky when you're translating. Many of you that have studied languages will know this. There's connotation that comes along with it. And so we use typically 3 or 4 words that kind of give the best idea of what we want to get across with this. So pistis means confidence. It means assurance. It means faithfulness. But what's interesting about what pistis means is that confidence, assurance, and faithfulness both need to be in something. We have confidence in something. We have assurance of something. And faithfulness is our devotion to something. So these are not words that we simply use to mean we don't have confidence in nothing. We don't have assurance of nothing. Pistis specifically refers to faith that has to have something to believe in. These are words that we use to evaluate proof. So let me give you an example. If you have a friend that is late or that is always a liar, and they say, hey, let's go to the movies, I'm going to meet you there at 6:30. If they are a liar, are you going to show up to the movies at 6:30? No. If they're always late, are you going to be more like 7? Yes. Because you don't have confidence in what they're telling you. Because you know them. Or here's one. You won't get this financial advice from Dave Ramsey. You can invest in a mutual fund, but lottery tickets have a much higher return on investment. Astronomically higher. So what's the difference? Risk, assurance. You do not have the same assurance with a lottery ticket that you do with a mutual fund. But that's a true statement, right? Lottery tickets like $5, you could win 1,000. That's a pretty high return on investment. But we have something else that we use to evaluate whether or not that's true. Or maybe this one. My wife is gone for most of the day. Maybe your spouse is gone. We're apart from each other. How do we know we aren't cheating on each other? We don't. But we know the character of the other person. We know that we are faithful. We have shown that to each other, and so we don't assume we are cheating. Culture says faith is about what you don't know. It's only faith if you don't know something. But what pistis faith says is your faith and your belief has to be based on something you know. Your confidence in what you know, your assurance in what you know, determines your faithfulness to what you know. Now, once we have faith as something that we know, we can bring in a definition of faith from C.S. Lewis that I think is a little easier to understand. Faith is the art of holding on to things despite changing moods and circumstances. It's the art of holding on to things despite changing moods and circumstances. So, culture, though, most often doesn't attack our confidence or the basis for our belief when it challenges our belief. Culture changes the mood and the circumstances around our faith. And so we may feel less confident. Doesn't change how confident we should be, it just changes how we feel. And if we know this, it changes the way that we interact with culture. How we negotiate culture as people of faith ultimately determines how appealing our faith appears and the impact Christianity will have on the culture in the future. On a personal level, it will determine the effectiveness of our ministry and whether or not we remain Christians. So how did we get to where we are now? How did we get to this divide? Where the culture says that faith is lunacy. It is equivalent to delusion. It is equivalent to believing in the Easter Bunny well into your 40s. I thought that was good. I didn't? Okay, thank you. As I did too. I thought Medina just said, I didn't. And I'm like, oh, okay. You and the microphone, big critics. In order to understand how we got to that big divide on things like definitions of faith, we have to understand the last 70 to 80 years of American history. I told you it was going to be 2.5 hours long. Now, because we're going to look at these quickly, we're going to gloss over some things. We're going to miss some big events. We might overemphasize other events, but we're going with a big picture here. So let's start in the 1940s and 50s. This is the homecoming. This is when veterans of World War II came home. There was a baby boom, for obvious reasons. And church attendance during this time was assumed. It was part of what you did. You could safely assume that you and your neighbors, at least on the surface, held to the same views of morality. Patriotism is also on the rise. We had just gotten out of World War II. We had just won that war. At the same time, were just entering a new conflict, the Cold War with the USSR, now Russia. And so they painted this picture of Christian, righteous, moral America against the atheist, secular, evil Russians. Now this paints a little, this is over the rest of the time we're going to be talking about, almost the entire time. And so we'll see some of the impact of this as we go on. But you can tell that they're trying to mix patriotism and devotion to God or religion, because this is actually when In God We Trust appears on our money, and this is when Under God is added to the Pledge of Allegiance. They're linking everything together in order to strengthen the patriotism to make us stronger against the USSR. And then we go into revolution, into the 60s and 70s. Now, as this happens, trickling down from the universities is the rise of moral relativism. That's a fancy philosophical term, so let me unpack it some. Moral relativism basically means that there is no right and wrong. There is only what you believe is right and wrong. You may believe that something is wrong. I may not. You do your thing, I'll do mine. Or we decide as a culture what's right and what's wrong. But that's still not a definitive right and wrong. We could change it tomorrow if we changed our minds. We also have the Vietnam War. Now, the Vietnam War changes the assumption of patriotism that we had after World War II, because we could see the Vietnam War taking place. And we began to question, should we be here? Should we be sending our boys to fight this? Off to cruel deaths sometimes, for countries that we don't understand, and we don't know why we're fighting. So this erodes the assumption of patriotism. It's not there anymore. And the sexual revolution, mixed with moral relativism, begins to question the traditional views of morality. And so while we entered the 1940s and the 1950s, we know what we believe, we're grouping together, we're mixing religion and patriotism so that we can better fight the USSR. Now we have a group that's branching off of that and growing and saying, you know what, I'm not sure I agree with that anymore. I'm going to be over here. And so we have more division than we had after the homecoming. And then we get into the response to this. We get into the 1980s and the 1990s. And this is really where we see the response to this. The most popular was the moral majority, led by Jerry Falwell. This is where the war metaphor first appears. And I don't like this culture war metaphor, because it implies that you are over here, we are over here, we cannot get along, we are going to fight it out with you. So can we see why the culture doesn't think that we want to get along with them? We're telling them whenever we talk about the culture wars, we don't care about getting along with you, we just want you gone. We're just going to beat you. This is also where Christianity begins its relationship with only right-wing politics. It's been involved with politics since the 1940s and 50s, but now it's just the right wing. And this is also the rise of Christian media. It has been around a good bit, but It's really gaining in popularity right now. So we say, we're not going to engage the culture anymore. We're going to step away from it and let politicians influence the culture with what we believe they should be influencing. We're not going to actually go out there and try and change minds. We're going to bubble up, turtle up, and stay with our own media. Religion begins to see culture as the enemy. Religion began to see culture as its enemy. And then we hit 2001, specifically September 11th. I don't need to go on and explain what happened then, but the terrorist attacks on our country were some of the worst examples of terrorism we had seen in many years around the world. And they were religiously motivated. And so a minority of atheists now says, you know what, I am done. I am done with seeing religion. We have books published like Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion. We have Sam Harris's Letter to a Christian Nation, basically saying, hey, you need to drop the religion if you're going to go anywhere moving forward. And we have books like How Religion Poisons Everything, which was Peter Hitchens, or Chris Hitchens. And so there's a rise in secularism. Secularism, the belief that religion does not belong in the public square, that is something you do in private on your own time. It should not be in politics. And scientism. Remember, we used to have relativism where you could believe anything that you wanted, and that was okay. Science, as long as it doesn't hurt other people. Now, scientism comes in and says, what you should believe, the only things you can believe, are that which has been verified by science. Now, a little logical red flag should go up there, because that statement can't be verified by science. Yeah. But it's still rising in belief. Now, religion seems to get in the way of progress. And if in the 1980s and the 1990s, religion said culture is our enemy, now it feels more like culture is saying, no, religion is our enemy. And we're on two sides of a gulf, lobbing attacks at each other, which is why this is the entrenchment phase. There are three main differences that we're going to talk about in the coming weeks. Three things where religion and culture seem to differ. There's a conflict over science and its place with religion. Some people want religion to trump science. Other people want science to trump religion. No one's actually looking and saying, hey, you know, these can actually work together, at least not in the popular media. All we hear are the differences. We have differences over morality. People still want morals to be relativistic because they want to do what they want to do. And if your morals are relative, you can do that. And we have different views of what truth is. This is the conflict over science. How do we arrive at what we know? But let's take a moment, and we've looked at the culture, but what happens when this goes on at a personal level? How does what's happening in the culture affect people? Because we can look at the culture and say, we want to go out there and make a difference, but you're not going to make a difference in the culture unless you start working with people. And many of you, some of the audience, may be ready and say, yeah, tell me how to reach them. Tell me how to go out there. Tell me how to communicate this. Tell me how to teach my faith to people. And hold on, I'm going to come back in July. We're going to talk about that. Right now, I'm going to talk to the people that are saying, you know what? You're right. I do feel like the bad guy sometimes, and I don't want to feel like the bad guy. I see this division. I'm living in the middle of it right now. And I want to talk to you because I've been there. It's there in the summer of 2009. So this is our very first hashtag, MySermon16. It's a my story in a sermon, MySermon16. This is me, 2009, graduating from college. That's me on the far left. My hair was that curly. I don't know what happened. To my right is my friend Dustin. Down there is Becca, and just above Becca is her husband Jeremy. They actually had their first son on the day that Kelly and I had our first daughter, that's just cool, right? There's my friend Caleb and my friend Graham, and I loved my years of college. I was fortunate enough to go to Asbury College, now university, in Wilmore, Kentucky. If you've never heard of Wilmore, that's probably right. It's a small, small town in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of horse country, about 20 minutes outside of Lexington. And I went to school in 2005 and entered, all schools have a bit of a bubble. Asbury's was a strong Christian bubble. And I went there not to hide, but because I wanted to learn about my faith. I wanted to learn more things. And the professors there were going to teach me more than I would get at a secular university. They would care about putting my faith in with the culture. But 2005 is also the time that we really began to see the angry atheists rise up. And I do refer to the angry atheists not as all atheists are angry, but there is a specific breed that was rising up at this time that called themselves the New Atheism, or the anti-theists. They didn't just believe in God, they wanted to abolish the idea of God and make it so ridiculous that no one would ever believe in it because they thought it was harmful. While this is happening, I'm growing spiritually because largely of these people and others that aren't in this picture. But I graduated in 2009. And they don't let you take your friends with you. So I moved back home. And I moved back home to kind of figure out what the next step was. Turns out it was getting married and coming here. You guys already know how this story ends, by the way. And my best friend Billy went off to basic training to join the Air National Guard. Or the Air Force Reserves, I think. And so I was alone. All of my friends from church, not many. Many of them had already left the faith. Many of them were away at college. And so I spent most of my days alone, waiting for things to start. And during this time, I needed community. I needed a group of people around me. I was used to people challenging me in my faith, growing in my faith, and pushing me to the next thing in my faith. So I began to look for a community of believers online because I couldn't find a community of believers where I was. And what I found was that the online Christian environment had changed a lot. And that it was no longer a supportive kind of Christians only, we want to see you grow, we want to talk with you environment. There were people coming in that were angry and that were not arguing, but coming in only to bash Christians with the guise of argument. And I began to, I was very confident in my faith, perhaps overconfident in my faith. And I began to see things I had never seen before that I did not know how to respond to. And that led to a time of intense questioning. I didn't have anyone to work this out with. I didn't really have anyone that I could talk this out with. My friends were mostly gone, and I would occasionally talk to them. But I was alone going through this. And there were nights where I would go to bed, certain that in the morning I would wake up and say, I don't think I'm a Christian anymore. What I found is that there are anchors to hold us to our faith. When our faith is tested, we don't see it. Because faith is being confident in what we hope for and being assured of what we cannot see. Faith is off in the distance, but culture is right here. Faith is something that we have to work for. Faith is something that, especially when we, remember C.S. Lewis's definition, when our circumstances or when our mood changes, it can be hard to hold on to. But culture is right in front of us always with the easy answers. And I had at the very least faithfulness. And I said, no, I still don't have all my questions about what I would be believing in after. I don't have all my questions about atheism answered. I'm not jumping over there until I thoroughly explore the answers that Christianity has to these questions. And so I began doing that research. And I'm here, and I'm talking about this now because it's very important to me that you all know we have really good answers. And we can turn around and ask them questions that says, hey, you're saying this is more appealing, but if you think about it, is it, or is it just easier? What's funny is that I learned that actually I had a really good resource in my house the whole time. I was grading some papers,
in our office once, and I looked at the bookshelf, and I realized that my father has whole sections of the bookshelf on Christian apologetics, on defending the faith, on answering questions. Because he liked that stuff too. And he'd asked questions himself before. So I know there are some of you here that are saying, you know what? Part of that's my story too. And we need to be open with it. We feel the temptation for easy cultural answers because we have a faith that's like Peter in Matthew 14. And I know you know this story because we talked about it just a few weeks ago. But we're going back. Immediately, after he'd been preaching, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he dismissed them, he went up on the mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, there was a... Wait, I lost my spot. Later that night, there was a storm. And the boat was buffeted because the wave was against it, and Jesus was still on the land. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the water. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come out to you on the water." "Come," Jesus said. Then Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. And then things went swimmingly. I'm more proud of that one than I should be. When he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink, crying out, "Lord, save me!" Because Peter, like us, looks around him and says, "This does not look like what I should be doing right now. First of all, I'm walking on water, and that's weird. But also, this is a storm." Peter was a fisherman. Peter knew storms. He knew they were bad news, and that if you were out of the boat during a storm, you were in trouble. And so he goes by what he knows, by what he's been taught, by what his culture says, and whoop, goes down. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You have little faith," he said. "Why did you doubt?" I always thought it was interesting that Jesus made this story about doubt. Because it wasn't Peter taking his eyes off God. That was the big thing. It was him saying, looking at everything around me and questioning, is this where I should be right now? It was that doubt that he was going to get in trouble and that it was going to hurt him. When they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God, because that's what you do when you walked on the water." So many of us know people that are saying, "I feel like I am out of the boat," and maybe you can relate to this. I have a friend right now who's saying, "I'm not sure I'm a Christian right now." Because she's recently moved, and she's looking at the group of Christians that are influenced by their culture, and you know what? There are some racial issues these Christians really need to work out, and that the culture has put into them. And so she's looking at them saying, "I am not sure I want to be a part of that." And meanwhile, she's in part of this other group that's saying, "Did you see those Christians? Can you believe how hateful they are?" And when people are saying that about Christianity, you don't want to go back and say, "Well, I want to call this is what I want to be." And so this side's looking at them, this side is looking at I don't know what, and she's in the middle saying, "I don't know what to choose," and no one's looking at Jesus. We have people that have been hurt by Christians. They're over here and they say, "You know what, my boss was a Christian, passed me up for a promotion for no good reason, wouldn't listen to my suggestions. I'm going to a new job." This is another one of my friends. He goes to a new job, already kind of angry at his boss, who is a Christian. And he goes there, and he is now with people that say, "You know what? Yeah, that's what Christians do. They just look after their own. They don't look after you. That's what they do." And so he's looking at how angry his boss is, and he's looking at this new culture that looks real appealing that he wants to be a part of. And what he told me is, "I realized that my faith was based in the culture where I was. So now I don't believe that." He realized what he said was, my faith was based in the culture of where I was. So I don't believe that anymore. What he didn't really flip to is, he flipped to a new culture, not anything that he could say was truer. because he's not looking at Jesus. He's seeing the anger that he's got at this guy. He's seeing the acceptance that he gets here, and he's making a decision about Christianity without looking at Christ. We know people that ask questions, and when they came to church, the church said, "You can't ask that." And so they went over here, and they said, "Oh yeah, you can ask that, and you're right to ask that because the church is wrong," and they're not looking at Jesus. And we have people that spent their life in church and never saw the gospel lived out. Church was a country club. Church was for those people that are in the church. And they said, "Well, that doesn't look right because I look over here and they're saying they're loving, but I look over here and I see people loving other people." And so they're looking at where they were and they're looking at where they are now, and they're not looking at Jesus, and so they're making decisions. Gandhi said, "I like your Christians. I like your Christ. I don't like your Christians." Because what we are supposed to be is Christ in the world. And we don't always do a great job of it. Well, what we have to do in these moments where we're looking around at each other and at our culture is instead look at Jesus. We have to have grounds in our faith. We have to have anchors in our faith. And you know who does a really good job of that? It's a disciple we make fun of. Now, Thomas, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord," but he said, "Too soon, guys. Too soon. Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." I can't speak for Thomas. In my experience, what Thomas is saying is the voice of someone that wants to believe, but doesn't know. Thomas is someone that watched Jesus die, and now he doesn't know what to think. He doesn't know if this is a trick by the Jewish leaders to parade someone around that looks like Jesus and maybe get the rest of the leadership of Christianity flushed out. He just doesn't know. A week later, I want to stop there. I'd never noticed this. I read over this several times preparing for this sermon. What do you think that week was like for Thomas and the other disciples? A week later, they've got to be talking. I sure thought it was Jesus. I think you saw Jesus too, right, John? It was Jesus. A week, and he doesn't appear. We were his main guys. Why isn't he showing up to us? A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were closed and locked, Jesus came in among them and said, "Peace be with you," which is the first thing you should say if you ever appear in the middle of a room full of people. It's okay. But when they, that's the wrong verse. Then he looked at Thomas. And he says, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand. Put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." And Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." It wasn't a trick anymore. He saw the evidence. He put his faith, he put his confidence, he put his assurance in what he was seeing. And we don't get that. This is why Jesus says the next line. He says, "Because you have seen, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and have yet believed." That's us. That is us. When Thomas doubts, he looks to Jesus. He goes back to the core of what his belief is centered on. So let me ask you this. What is the core of your belief? That was a phone-droppingly good question. What is the core of your belief? What would you go back to if you were in Thomas's shoes? If you don't know, don't worry, I'm going to give you some suggestions. But you need to look into these things. And that's one reason why we're doing this sermon series. So that you can leave this series and say, you know what? I know now. I have some things to hang my hat on. I have my anchor in deeply rooted as the tides of culture change around me. The first thing we can focus on, we need to know and understand Christianity. What Christians believe, what's in the Bible, and what is expected of us as we call ourselves Christians. If someone comes up to you and says, hey, this is in the Bible, this is what faith is, you need to be able to say, no, actually, this is what faith is. It's this word pistis. And they'll say, what did you say? And you'll say pistis. It's a Greek word. And they'll say, oh, that makes more sense. We need to know what makes belief in God reasonable. If we're going to say, no, it's not just blind faith, we aren't just closing our eyes, they'll say, okay, what are you looking at? What's pointing you to God? And if we say, I don't know, we haven't done our research. We haven't given a convincing answer. And we need to develop the inner witness of the Spirit. Now, this is not something that you can go out and you can tell someone, you need to believe in God because of the inner witness of the Spirit. This is something that is deeply personal, deeply rooted between you and God. Those are some of the only things that kept me a Christian as I was wandering summer after I graduated, and it's probably the first thing that started gaining me back. And this is your relationship with God. You need to work on developing and strengthening this. I can't tell you a prayer to pray that will do this. I can't tell you to go look in these scriptures, although when I feel like I need this, I like to go to the Psalms because they tell me I'm not alone in how I feel sometimes. I can't tell you the mission trip to go on that will create memories that will show you how God works. But those are things that we need to do. Those are steps we need to take to develop and strengthen this inner witness of the Spirit. That's where we're headed this sermon series. We want to increase your confidence, give you more assurance so that you can develop more faithfulness. And so that by the time I come back at the end of July and we talk about how to engage and communicate this with the culture now, I hope that you're saying, good, because there's people I want to talk to, and there are things that I want to say to them. That's our goal, and that's our prayer for you as we start off on this new Faith and Culture series. You pray with me. Father, thank you for the anchors that you've given us. We may wish we had more. We may wish it could be clearer. Thank you that you've given us enough. Strengthen our faith. Help us to be better witnesses, better examples for those that don't have it. I don't know if you've ever been on a boat without an anchor. I had the privilege of going on a sailing trip in the Florida Keys. And there was a storm one night, the one night I had anchor watch. And before I was out there even, we lost the anchor. But we had another one. And we needed an anchor, or man, we were in tough straits. So even if you're saying, you know what, I'm feeling really good about my faith, blessings for you too. Go in peace, strengthening your confidence, growing your assurance, and increasing your faithfulness.